once you bring these scenes to life, you start realizing that what they are ultimately looking for is not so different. They all want to be loved, and they want to love, they want to belong and become something, and they want to, get over themselves and their own struggle. And yeah, I think the more we spend time being those characters, the more we understood that they're not as different from one another as they appear on the page.
This is a film I really love, and I got to see it earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival, and I visited it over the course of the year, and watching it over and over again, it reveals new things to me each time. But one thing I'm fascinated by, Ira, as I understand, you wrote this film with Franz in mind. How did that come about? What made you do that? And what did it feel like going to him with this part? And also, Franz, I'd love to hear what you thought about your side of that conversation.
Yeah, I've often written work based on an inspiration from an actor. Franz I saw in a film by Michael Haneke, the Austrian director, called Happy End. And he's incredible in the film. And he also performs a karaoke dance performance of Sia's Chandelier, which is indelible on my mind, and it was for a couple of years. I just kept remembering something about the force of that performance, and the ease of that performance, while being both very magnetic but also very, very comfortable. And that combination is really interesting to me. So my co-writer, Mauricio Zacharias, and I wrote the film with Franz as an inspiration. Now, then he will either do it or he won't. So in a way, we are in a form of audition, because I was sending the script to someone that I'd already written for, and then it worked out okay. We made the film.
Yeah, very okay. It was wonderful to be approached by someone like Ira that has written something for you. It's pretty intimidating. And yeah, it felt like an honor, but also I was wondering if this is like written for me. Am I Thomas? Like, am I?
Well, and that's the thing about the character is, he's, you could have easily called this movie The Worst Person in the World.
I love that guy.
But we're captivated by him. I mean, he's a fascinating character and a very moving character as well. And I'm curious, how much of that was on the page? Did you guys work to sort of bring out the humanity of Thomas?
I think on the page he's even worse. And then, once you bring these scenes to life, you start realizing that what they are ultimately looking for is not so different. They all want to be loved, and they want to love, they want to belong and become something, and they want to, get over themselves and their own struggle. And I think he might have more difficulty being with himself. So yeah, since he can't be with himself, he can't be with others, for sure, and he inflicts a lot of chaos. But I think the more we spend time being those characters, the more we understood that they're not as different from one another as they appear on the page.
You and Ben are playing a married couple, obviously, who've clearly been together for some time. And I'm curious, what did it take to establish that sense of familiarity? Do you have the time to prepare for something like that? Is that, because, when I see you guys on screen first time, it feels automatically like, oh yeah, these guys have been together a while. So how do you establish that?
We met in a cafe with Ira. It was Ira's idea, and then he left after 30 seconds. And yeah, I guess that was on purpose.
Yeah, I think actors, they know they need to create intimacy in a somewhat accelerated fashion. I think of it as like taking ecstasy without the ecstasy. They've got to get close, and they've got to, you know, if it's going to work out well, they rely on each other. I think it's significant in the film that I don't rehearse with the actors in a traditional sense. So there's no table read, there's no rehearsals. There is script, there's costumes, there's other actors, there's locations, and there's a story that's written. And that really carries so much. And what I'm really trying to do is create a kind of vessel where the actor appears, but there is something around them which is fictional. The costumes are fictional, the story is fictional. So there's this tension between who they are as a person. So you're watching Franz Rogowski and you're also watching Tomas, and then you go back and forth. And I want that kind of fluidity. But we also spent a lot of time together. We did on this film particularly with the costumes and coming up with wardrobe. So I think that right after that meeting, maybe the next day, the three of them were like in their underwear together, trying on this clothes and that clothes. And that, again, it does really create a familiarity that becomes very useful for the film.
Yeah, also I think we had a lot of appreciation for one another, and I knew Ben's work. I love him as an actor. I think he's incredible, and each of us had a unique color that we brought to the painting, and I guess we wanted to experience that with each other. We were curious to see what would happen, you know. And it's funny when you meet first time and you know that you're going to have sex a week later. And to a certain extent, you are shy and you are vulnerable, and you know that the other one knows how that feels because you've done a couple of works before, and I think we had a lot of trust and respect for each other.
Actually, let's talk about the sex scenes. Not because because they're sex scenes, but there's quite a lot of it. It's a very intimate film, but there's still story being told through those sex scenes. I mean, they have almost narrative arcs, and each scene is different from the others. I mean, there's character work happening, there's narrative happening, but there are also sex scenes which are, I'm sure, incredibly complicated to shoot when you're making a movie. Talk about how you sort of establish that sense of intimacy, but also how you approached shooting these scenes.
I wouldn't say they're incredibly complicated, but that doesn't mean they don't contain a lot of vulnerability and the unknown. So as a director, you're setting up, the first thing I'm doing is asking sort of what do you feel comfortable with? What don't you feel comfortable with? And it's very important for the actors to establish their lines. And then once those are established, you don't push them. They exist. And then you're kind of having to take that into account when you think of where do you put the bodies? How do the bodies, where in the frame and where on the bed and or not, or the couch or whatever it is that is happening. But I did do what you describe, which is think about each one as telling something different. That being said, I'm at the mercy of the actors. There's so much improvisation in those scenes, as there is in every scene in the film. They're not different. The actors are the ones who are going to either take it to this place or take it to this place or take it somewhere you can't imagine. And when you see it, when it happens and it has that level of authenticity and intimacy, you're like, oh, thank God. You're really very grateful to the actor.
Franz, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how it felt. It's a very intimate adventure, and I mean, obviously you are just pretending, but you are sweating and you feel each other's skin and each other's heartbeat, and maybe arousal. Like you get very intimate, even if there's no penetration. It feels like a real act of sexuality, and you cannot really coordinate that to a degree where you feel safe, in a sense that you know what's going to happen. You just know that in case something goes wrong, you can count on each other, and you can clarify some things like, I don't know, Like for me, it was important that we can be naked in front of each other, but that I know that the framing won't explicitly show our penises, for example, or our assholes. And then once you know that, you can forget about it and just be there and be naked and go for it. I didn't feel like, thanks God it's happening. I felt more like it was overwhelming. It was.
But that's the difference between the director and the actor.
Yeah.
Because I can't do what I'm asking you to do. Yeah. So I have to have some sort of faith or hope that you will do something with that material. Because in a way, as a director and as a filmmaker, I am observing without getting in the middle. So I'm trying to think, where is the camera that you feel that there's an intimacy between these two people that your voyeuristic position doesn't intrude upon. And I think in a way what it's about is, what do you not show? And I thought a lot about Roman Polanski and Rosemary's Baby. There's a scene with Mia Farrow on a bed, and there's a door frame, and you just see her legs, and you can't see her face, and you can't see her response, and she's on a phone. And Polanski imagined the entire audience trying to lean to get around the door frame. And I feel like that's because they feel it's so real. They're so there. They want to be a part of it, but they're excluded a little bit.
I also remember, like, usually I prefer scenes where you don't have to talk, and sex scenes can be the easiest scenes. But since the scene was so long, I remember us starting to have sex, and you just do your thing and you pretend a little bit, but then if it goes on forever, it kind of becomes real. And I think it's the longest sex scene that I have shot so far.
Thank you.
Actually, I would just follow up on that. Earlier this year, the film was, slapped with an NC-17 rating. What went through your mind during that whole period? Because I remember, it's so weird because, you make a film that's so intimate and so delicate, and then gets into the world of like ratings and is it prurient and that kind of thing. As a filmmaker, what goes through your mind when that happens?
Yeah, it's a form of censorship which seems to limit the possibility of your work, which is very personal, being seen. So it's upsetting. The last couple of years I've watched a lot of pre-code movies from the 1930s with my kids and family, and I really notice that the movies made before the Hays Code was put down have this liberty that got lost in a lot of cinema, and maybe we're still trying to recover from what was lost when that was done. And actually the MPAA is just an extension of that. The Hays Code had to go somewhere, so it went to this kind of rating system, which I feel sort of excludes people. I made a movie called Love is Strange with John Lithgow and Alfred Molina, and it's a very gentle movie. It could be an after-school special, and it was given an R. And I'm still like, something is wrong if that,
because they were a married gay couple, probably, right?
Yeah, I can't even say specifically. I think they're it's basically, though, there's a question of not why was this film given an NC-17, more is the question is, why does this rating system still exist?
Why does it still exist?
Talk to Foucault about that. I don't know, control and an attempt, because we still live in a Puritan society, and that there is an attempt to control so many things. This is just one of the many ways in which the dominant tries to control, like Tomas.
Franz, you were saying actually just now, you said you prefer scenes where you don't have to do much talking, and we talked about the sex scenes obviously, but there's great physicality in your performance. Not just like the scene with the bike, for example. And I know you. I've interviewed you before. I know you used to be a dancer, and your performances always tend to have a great deal of physicality to it. I'm curious, is that something that you work on beforehand? Is that something that you specifically think about bringing to a part, or does that kind of just happen?
You always bring your body, and you always bring your own history, and mine might be a bit more physical, my background, and also I have a poor hearing. I hear 15% on my left, and on the right I'm deaf. So often I'm just trying to understand my partners in front of the camera, and it might come across as very physical. But I guess, for example, in Great Freedom, I had to be a man that, after the Allies freed the camps, was sent to prison for being gay, because that was the law in the States, but also in Germany before the Third Reich. And I wouldn't dare to pretend that I know how that must have felt. So I would just choose to weaken my body to a degree where I really feel pain, and where I can't, I don't know, walk the staircases anymore, and then I don't have to show off as an actor, but I just have to keep it together, not to collapse. And that sometimes feels more truthful to me. And I think many actors have this problem, that they wonder, how can I become something that I'm not? And the reality is that I want to be famous. I want to make a lot of money. I don't know. I watch porn, like a lot of very uninteresting things. And then you want to be this real deep actor, and you don't know how it works, and you don't know how to get there. And then you do a diet, and you lose a lot of weight. So that's something that is real. That's something that nobody can take away from you. And I guess since acting is so vulnerable sometimes, a lot of actors try to do something with their body so they have at least something they can rely on.
I would just add that I think, Franz, part of what makes you such a brilliant actor is that there's something instinctual that you're doing, which is connected to understanding the body almost as a form of sculpture, and what language can the body, but it's not a conscious act, or it goes beyond the conscious.
It's very conscious.
It goes beyond the conscious, though.
I mean, that's something that I really always try to do. I always try to find an abstract version of the scene, and I always try to translate emotion into action. So I would rather find a specific moment where I would, I don't know, leave this table than to pretend that I'm angry, and just let the action create the emotion. Or with your eyes, when you open up to someone, or you prefer to be for yourself, but your lines actually connect to the past that you share, like these spaces that you always play with. I think, to me, they're much more emotional in terms of texture and dramaturgy than my, pretending to feel something. Because what I feel on stage or in front of the camera is that I'm exposed, and that I always feel that I'm not the character, But if I find an action and something that I really do, there is a reality that I can share with the fictional character that makes it real to a certain extent.
I would say the hardest scene in this film, the one where we had the most takes, was the last scene in the hallway, when Tomas goes and visits Agathe. And the reason it was so hard, and maybe this is what I'm saying, is because it was important to me that Tomas Franz end up on the ground, and to get to the ground took a lot of work, took a lot of takes, because yes, you might make conscious decisions, but in order for it to be what you need for the movie, it has to go into the unconscious. You have to find a way in which we don't see that consciousness, at least. So I think that was part of the struggle in that scene.
I would like to reshoot that scene.
18 more times.
Actually, I wanted to ask, Franz, last year we did a Q&A for The Great Freedom, which is a wonderful film, if you get a chance to see it. But during that Q&A, you were wearing these amazing leopard print pants, which when I saw passages, I saw those leopard print pants. So the thing, and I mean, this is kind of a glib way of approaching this question of costuming, which I think is very important in this film. But I do want to know, were those your clothes that were seeing the film, or did you take the clothes from the film?
I took them from the film.
But the bigger question is, how does costuming figure into this idea of sort of creating this almost physical reality so that you can embody, these fictional characters?
It helps a lot. I mean, as I tried to explain before, I don't really become a character. It's more like a collective effort, I would say. And if you find the right costume, and Hadija, our costume designer, she did a great job, and she was not just doing costume, but she was also bringing us together with her costume rehearsals. Her husband is our producer, so we did them in their apartment. Part of the costume is her own wardrobe. The leather jacket, the big one, is from her best friend, and I wear it now. It's in my wardrobe now, and I think in this case, some of the drama that we see unfold is also embodied in the costume. Like sometimes, at least me, I see costumes talking to one another, and they really don't match, and it's obvious that these textiles can't live together. It's not going to happen. Or when he, for example, tries to blend into her family and have a serious conversation with her parents. Yeah, it's there's a lot of tension costume-wise.
Ira, you've made a movie about a filmmaker. I mean, you've talked a little bit about your approach. It sounds like you're not maybe quite as fussy as Tomas is, as we see in that great opening scene. But how much of yourself are you bringing to this figure of the filmmaker?
I think for me to make a film, I need to really identify with the characters and what they're after and what they want. And I think I was interested in making a film about what men with power do with it. And so that's the story of the film. And I think during the pandemic and the lockdown, which is sort of when this story began, I thought a lot about like, we've lost so much, and it was hard, and I felt like I want more. And I kept asking myself, why? Why should you have more? And the question of that was kind of throughout the film, something that came to be because I want it. And that's what Tomas said, because I want it. And I think men and women, in a way, are animals. And want is what drives story and drives relationships, more than any concept of morality or right or wrong. I also wanted to make a really pleasurable film. And we at some point, Franz was like, really, should I do that? And I feel badly about being such a guy. And we watched James Cagney movies, because Cagney is someone who gives you this great sense that it can be extremely pleasurable to watch people behave very badly.
This will be, I think we're running out of time. This will be my last question, but I'm curious. I mean, Passages came out earlier this year. It was actually quite a success. You make smaller films, but has it gotten harder to make the kinds of films that you make? I mean, as a film critic, I'm always hearing about how the industry is changing and how it's harder to get more personal films made and things like that. I'm curious, you've been making films for a while now. Has it gotten harder?
30 years. I think that I'm somehow I got to a point really just 10 or 12 years ago where I've been able to create a sustainable model for myself as a filmmaker. So I can't say it's gotten harder for me. It hasn't gotten easy, but it hasn't gotten harder. That being said, I feel like I used to be one of 100 or 200, and now I'm one of like 10. So if you're looking at American cinema, I think the idea of sustaining a career making personal cinema, and I can list a lot of people, you would be like, really? It's hard for him or her to get a film made? Yes. So a robust world of independent personal cinema is not what we are in right now.
Well, on that note, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for staying. Thank you.
Thank you.